Hello, welcome to another special episode here at TectonicTakes, part of the Beautiful Game Network, sponsored by Roughneck Scarves. This is Ivan Ornelas, and I'm here with Phil Leyva from Quakes After 90. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. We've done some great stuff with Quakes After 90 already. They're friends of the podcast, and we enjoy listening to each other's content. So The only thing better than listening to each other's content is creating content together. And with the MLS season slowly but surely approaching, it's gonna be a fun one tonight.
Yeah, for sure, man. I was as soon as you guys contacted me, I was like, yeah, I'll be there for sure. So I'm glad to be on it.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. We're excited for this. Will be our first full MLS season as a podcast. We started shortly after the MLS is Back tournament, which feels like a year ago, and now, even though it's still a little less than a year ago, but it feels like ages ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, time it's going to go by quickly. Next thing you know, you'll have been doing this for a number of years, you know.
Yeah,
and you'll be talking about players who your listeners are going to be like, "What? I don't remember that guy at all." Like
exactly.
So yeah,
we'll get a good night's sleep, and then it'll be the playoffs tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but we'll see. We'll see.
So. All right, so here we go.
So what do you got on the docket, man?
All right, so we got a couple of Quakes related questions. I feel like most of them are Quakes specific. But we could also, some of these answers, we might draw comparisons to other teams and stuff. And then we'll close it out with a bit of a macro perspective on, how we think the league's going to go, which teams we're going to keep an eye on this season and stuff like that.
Okay.
All right. So first thing I got for you is, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? This team on paper has more talent on this roster as it stands for this upcoming season than it did for 2020.
Man, that's more talent. I don't know. I think there are some big question marks, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when we're looking at the forward position in the midfield. Like, those are the ones that I'm most concerned about. If I'm considering what we had last year and what we knew we had going into the season, with Magnus Eriksson playing as a kind of an attacking midfielder / forward at times, versus Chofis, which is a huge question mark for me. I'm not sure whether this is someone who's going to pan out in MLS, whether he's going to work well in Matias Almeida's system. Considering solely that itself, I would say that last year's was better, because also Abakasis is also a question mark, and we had Nick Lima last year. Right. So I know it's really easy to get motivated going into a season and thinking, oh, this is as good as it's been in a long time, because we say that every year. But right now, the reality is last year's team on paper, I think, was better. However, I think there might be a potential for this year's team to be better if Chofis and Abakasis and Remedy, the new additions to the team, can actually perform, and Remedy can actually alleviate some of the weight that's going to be put on Judson's shoulders in that sweeper defensive midfielder role.
Right. Of those you mentioned, Eric Remedy is the only one that has previous MLS experience. And I think that aspect of it gives me a bit more calmness, because whenever you, in any league, you see a whole influx of transfers where none of them have previously played in the league before, it puts a lot of pressure on all of them to get acclimated right away. So at least, if it takes a couple games for Chofis to get firing on all cylinders, at least we know what to expect from Eric Remedy playing in MLS, and he's going to be something that we can rely on.
I do want to add one thing, Ivan. Yeah. It's important to note also that the players have had more time in the system as well. Mm-hmm. So on paper, it might not look better, but in terms of the reality, once again, the players having the time to perform on the field in full matches, plus all the training time they've had now with Matias Almeida over the last over 2 years now, and coming in. So, the players who've actually been together and playing, and they were on the team last year and they're on the team again this year, and perhaps they were there previously and going through the whole thing with the coaching change and all that. Like, the team could perform better this year. But if we're just talking about on paper, I don't know. I don't know that it's better than it was last year.
Yeah, we'll just quickly run through the roster as it looks like right now. We have a few number changes, of course, that we've been tracking on Twitter on TectonicTakes. Goalkeepers, JT Marcinkowski with the new number 1. Looks like we're going to rely on him to be the starter for this upcoming season, which is thoroughly deserved, with the likes of Emi Ochoa and Matt Bersano as backups. Defense, the big change, of course, is Abacassis. And some of the mainstays coming back include Marcos Lopez and Osvaldo Alanis, who's still on loan from Chivas. And joining that loan from Chivas squad is one of our new additions, Javier Eduardo Lopez, also known as Chofis. We get Shea Salinas for another season. That's always fun. Eric Remedy from Atlanta United joining the ranks. Jackson Ewell, we'll see what he can do. In my recent MLS Multiplex article, I picked him as the Quakes player to get the most caps for the U.S. men's national team for the calendar year. Maybe that wasn't the most bold prediction, but I feel like Jackson Ewell will have a few opportunities to show how great he is. And if he stays with the San Jose Earthquakes for all of 2021, if he doesn't join the recent exodus of young players from North America to Europe, then I think we're going to be in for another good season if he continues to develop. Tommy Thompson, the man of many positions, he's going to be a key player this year, of course. We spoke with Flo Youngworth the other day. He was once the center defensive midfielder when he came into the Quakes, and he's really made that center back position his own here. And then the forwards, we have Chris Wondolowski still at the club, possibly his last season. Hopefully at some point we'll get to have fans back in the stadium if it is to be the end for a proper send-off. And then the likes of Carlos Fierro and Christian Espinoza for that offensive punch that this team at times desperately needed, and eventually we got out of them.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of some new faces, a lot of familiar faces. I'm excited to see how that will blend together. Where do you feel we still need improvements?
Oh, I think it's obvious. The forward position, definitely. But also because of what we have in the forward position, Andy Rios mostly, but even Chris Wondolowski, right? He's 38. We can't expect him to perform at the same level he did 7 years ago. 7, 8, 9 years ago, when he was performing in his prime. I think that's a huge issue that needs to be addressed. Now, if Rios performs well, then that's a whole nother story. But because we can't anticipate that there will be a lot of goal production from that area of the field, which is where you get it, right? It's the attacking area of the field. That puts the onus on the attacking midfield and the midfield in general. So then that also, begs the question, do the Quakes have enough in the midfield? So again, to bring up Chofis, unless he has some of the skill set that Magnus Eriksson had in terms of attacking, that's going to be a really big issue for this team, is finishing goals. So like you mentioned, Fierro can create goals. Christian Espinoza can create goals. Do they necessarily score them? They can, and they have, but we cannot, as a team, the Quakes cannot rely on that as a goal source. If Andres Rios doesn't perform well in the forward position, that's going to leave it on the attacking midfield. So I would say those two areas particularly, and I've kind of heard other people mention too, this is kind of the chatter I've seen on Twitter, is that the center back position could be an issue as well. So we have Alanis, we have Flo back there. We have a couple other younger options that can slot into the position as well. But I think that could also be an issue if the older guys aren't able to maintain fitness.
Right. And when Flo was on the interview recently, he spoke about how he saw what Walker Zimmerman could do last season when he was named the 2020 MLS Defender of the Year. And he compared himself to him in a way where, like, we have our own different skill sets, but we both perform at a high level for our teams. And while many people outside of San Jose, or even including San Jose, may not necessarily, if you have to pick every MLS defender to choose from, they'd pick Florian Youngworth the first out of all those defenders. I think that he's definitely a staying presence. Like, if you look at all the MLS defenses, the best ones have that rock in defense. I think Florian Youngworth, he is that rock in defense. He reminds me, as I wear the Golden State Warriors shirt as they're playing the Trailblazers tonight as we're recording this, it reminds me of Draymond Green. He's solid defensive contributions. He can be a good leader out there. He gets a little hot-headed sometimes, but that's what we love about him, that passion. So I think, but, when you're not a team that's in that top tier of a league, you're always looking for ways to improve, and center back would be part of that list too. If for depth, then nothing else.
I would say that's incredibly important to mention, the depth aspect, especially when you have a season that we already know is going to be condensed. There are going to be weeks in which they might have 3 games in like 8 days, and you can't necessarily rely on aging legs to maintain through all those performances. So if we're looking at the depth right now for the center back position, I mean, I'm looking at the roster and I see Alanis and Youngworth, right? The 2 that I mentioned already.
Right.
And then we have Tanner Beeson and Jacob Akinurich, who
and
I
Casey
believe
Wells, if you want to go that deep.
But what other depth is there?
It's a position of extremes. We got the veterans and we got young players. You don't have too much in between. And
no, there's not. Whereas with the midfield, you've got Judson and Remedy that can kind of go back and forth in the central defensive part. And I imagine that when Jackson Ewell is out, I should say, because like you mentioned, he's going to be capped for the U.S. men's national team. They will have something to put in there that could be, I don't want to say comparable, because Ewell has a really impressive skill set that is not easily replaceable, but Remedy might be able to step in there. And then there's still, I think, a lot for Eric Calvillo, maybe even Gilbert Fuentes to show in that position as well. So I kind of feel like the bigger issue might be if we're comparing those parts of the defensive formation, defensive mid and center back, right, where we need strong sweepers, where we need people to recover, who are very fit and, I hate to say it, but younger, because like if you're going to stay in shape over a short period of time, you're going to need really quick bounce back, to prepare for the next game. And so I think that's going to be an issue to consider. There is going to be that, that center back depth.
Right.
But, maybe Tanner Beeson steps in. He got some reps early on because Matias Almeida his hand was forced to play some of these younger guys. And perhaps they have that in-game experience plus the training experience over the last couple of years in this system, that it's not as big of a deal as I'm making it out to be. So it's just a matter of, seeing what happens when the teams are on the field.
Right. I think with Tanner Beeson and Jacob Akanurije, we saw them appear in a few games. And with those young players, you do want to see that involvement increase as each season passes. But you don't want it to go from like 5 appearances to 25 and hope for the best. You have to have a bit of a plan.
Sure.
Speaking of plans and lineups, if you had to pick your starting lineup for 2021, what would it be?
Okay. So I think the back line is, well, first of all, let's start with the goalkeeper, right? JT Marcinkowski has to be your starting goalkeeper. He's the best. As soon as he stepped in last season, there was a change, a noticeable change in the team. And he organizes the back line really well. You can hear him. He's like really vocal, especially with, during COVID, there wasn't a crowd, so you can really hear the voices around the stadium. Like Marcinkowski is you could tell he marshals the team really well from his position. So JT is going to be the goalkeeper starting in my system. If we're going to go with the back 4 next, I would say at left back, you're going to go with our new signing, Luciano Abacasis. And then the center backs are going to be Alanis and Youngworth.
Right.
And then the left back, did I already say left back?
Yeah, left back.
He'd be at the right back position.
Oh, right, yeah.
He'd be at the right back position. And then the left back is obvious, right? Marcos Lopez, who is turning into one of the best players on the team, I think. So Marcos Lopez would be at the left back position. looking at the midfield, I think you have Judson and just sitting right in front of the back four. And then, see, this is where it's a little bit tricky considering the skill sets that we have. Now, I think Jackson Yule is a for sure starter on this team, so he has to be starting.
Just depends on where. If he's like a center mid, like more of a 8, or if he's more of a 10,
I think he has to be playing as an 8, or in some sort of pivot role, like because that's what he does. He distributes really well. He has great poise on the ball. Like those are the skills that he has. That he brings to the table that are better than a lot of other central midfielders in the league, especially American midfielders.
Yeah, I think if he's in that like Darlington Nagbe role, like you wouldn't say Darlington Nagbe is totally defensive, but he does have that link between defense and attack, then I think Yule would fill that role too for the Quakes.
Mm-hmm. So that leaves me with 4 more positions, right? Mm-hmm. Christian Espinoza has to be in on the right wing.
Right.
I think. And then you have to have, based on the performances that we saw at the end of last season, you have to have Carlos Fierro in there.
Right.
And let's see, that leaves us with 2 more.
Right.
So I think looking at the lineup, it has to be Chofis and Andres Rios. Like that's what we got. That's where our skills are. Now, of course we all want to see Cade Cowell because he's exciting. He's young. He's got all this talent, but is he ready to step in on the first day and lead the team, lead the attack? Maybe he is, but I would like to see him come in as a sub first. And then perhaps earn that spot. And Matias Almeida's eyes, right? He's going to be the judge of that. We can shout and cry all we want about wanting to see Cade Cowell, but it's not going to happen, right? We saw the same thing with Daniel Vega and JT Marcinkowski. It's going to be a matter when the coach determines it's the best moment to start this player who is developing in the system. So I think it's going to be Andy Rios and Chofis in those last 2 attacking positions. And then you're going to have Wondolowski off the bench. You're going to have Cowell off the bench. Mm-hmm. And then you'll have
depending on the situation.
Of midfielders. And Remedy's going to be off the bench too.
Right. If you're defending like a 2-0 lead, it's 75 minutes, then you put in Remedy. If you're need another attacking option in that position, you can put in Shea Salinas. So that's a good situation to be in. You're starting 11. Which we may or may not know. It depends on when the opening game of the season starts and the lineup we see on the field. And if it goes well, then we get a better idea of what we'll see game 2, 3, and so forth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think the only way I would be frustrated with Almeida's selection dilemma with Cade Cowell is if it's a situation where the defenders of the opposing team are getting tired and either he doesn't sub in Cowell at all, especially if like he only uses 2 subs that game as opposed to 3, or if he subs him in at like the 88th minute, then that's the only ways that would be totally.
So I think that's going to be Cowell's specialty, like for this team is really coming in late and just adding that firepower. I could see him earning a starting spot in the next couple of years, but I think right now that'd be a really good place for him. The one area I could see an argument for Chris Wondolowski starting in this team too.
Right.
But being, where he is in his career, Rios is probably the better option, as much as I hate to admit it. Like he's going to be the better option there in that position.
All right. And as for candidates for a big bounce back season, I think there's a couple players that come to mind that I think will want to redeem themselves for at least patches of how they performed in 2020. I think Tommy Thompson, I'm not sure how much game time he's going to get, but he's going to have a point to prove that he still has a role to play for the Quakes. I think both center backs, Youngworth and Alanis, they're going to hope to be more healthy and consistent in the lineup to start with, and then to not have too many games where they concede multiple goals. Yeah.
If we're talking about players who are already on the team, I would agree just about with everything you said there. And I think even Christian Espinoza has a little bit to prove in terms of his finishing. Could you imagine if that's an element that he brings to the team, is finishing goal? I mean, because he did. He scored some goals last season, but oftentimes he spoiled his chances. So I can see that. And also Chofis, right? Mm-hmm. He's I mean, we saw the memes, right? You type in Chofis and one of the first words that comes up is gordo, which is totally uncool, but I'm just saying, like, he has an opportunity to come here and show that he is a quality player right off the bat and lead this team, right? Coming from Chivas.
Right. I mean, thankfully he's not at Real Madrid, so it wouldn't be at the same level of abuse as Eden Hazard's getting on the internet. But still, like,
Yeah.
I don't even think we need to translate the word gordo for our English-speaking listeners. They know what
Yeah.
that means. So yeah, it's not a great sign when that's one of the few searches that comes up for your new signing, especially with the San Jose Earthquakes. You only get so many signings compared to some other clubs. But yeah, I think there's a way for him to fuel that negativity into positivity for him.
Definitely.
And I think this is a good environment for him to have a new start. I think there's a couple
I think
of
the fans are
former
behind
Chivas.
him. Yeah.
There's a couple former Chivas players there to help, him with the transition from Guadalajara to San Jose, which, are two very different cities. So next we have, where do you think the Earthquakes land in the standings? And we'll just say Western Conference because it would be too complicated to say within MLS. But
yeah. Oh man, I hate doing these kind of predictions because what I want to say is they're going to be at the top of the standings. That's what I want to say. I really.
That's what we all want to say.
That's what I want, and I do that in my heart, But if we're going to try to step aside and be objective here. Right. If the team performs well as a team, which to me is a lot of the onus is going on to Chofis, like I said before, and also into the forward position. If that clicks, I could see them up there. But the reality is, I think the team finishes mid to lower mid-table.
I would be happy with mid-table. Like mid-table is a great place
and I
to
think
be,
that's pretty optimistic. I mean, I'm a Quakes fan, and I would say but I could see them finishing lower for sure. There's a lot of competition in the Western Conference. I mean,
right.
You have the LA teams. I know the Galaxy are trying to bounce back, and LAFC is going to be good so long as they have Bob Bradley as their coach. You've got Portland, Seattle. I mean, it's just stacked in the Western Conference. So
yeah, if you're to say that 5 of those spots are going to be, if 5 of those 7 spots, according to what I'm looking at, it's looking like the top 7 from each conference are the only guarantees to make the playoffs this season. If you can think 5 are going to be chalked up with Sporting Kansas City, Minnesota, Seattle, Portland, and LAFC. And that only leaves 2 spots left for the rest of the Western Conference for who knows what LA Galaxy is going to look like, if they're going to be a mess again or they're going to get their crap together. FC Dallas, they are doing great at producing youth players, but can they produce players to stay for MLS? Austin is a wild card, of course. Colorado Rapids, they have a lot of exciting young players that they're going to be tough.
Yeah. No, they do. We didn't even mention Sporting Kansas City, right? Which was one of the better teams in the league last season. So,
exactly.
And then Minnesota. I mean, they've been playing incredibly under Adrian Heath. He finally got some talent, and they've just been solid. Yeah, I don't see the Quakes surpassing these teams. I would love to see it. I want to be clear about that. I would love to see it, and if it happens, I'll just be like right up there with every other Quakes fan cheering them on. And
I'm looking right now like 7th or 6th place at the best, and maybe like 8th or 9th.
We have 13 clubs in the Western Conference coming up.
So like there's a couple I don't think will be worse than Real Salt Lake or Houston Dynamo, but I think that's the only guarantees I would give.
I don't know, man. I don't know if those are guarantees, but time will tell. Right. I can see the Quakes landing at 8th place.
Yeah, 8th place, I think.
I think that's my official prediction. I hate doing predictions, but that's my official prediction is the Quakes land at 8th. It'll be kind of disappointing. But you know what? Like I said, I believe on paper they're not as good as they were last year, but I think the potential, considering the amount of training and the games they've had together and the X factor, which is Chofis, if that pans out, this team could really be functioning on like full cylinder like they did during the MLS's back tournament last year. So I think time's going to tell. I think a lot is going to be on Chofis this year. On Chofis, more so than it was on Jutson last year. And Jutson has somebody to help replace him, so he can recover for more games. So, yeah, if Chofis plays well, this team could go all the way up to the top.
Yeah. So, as far as player acquisitions, I think at this point, for all MLS teams, what they have right now is what they're going to go into in the season. They may get some like free agents from like USL teams or something.
Yeah.
But as far as major transfers, we probably won't see any until the summer window.
The summer, right?
Do you have like a player, like maybe not like a idealistic choice, but like maybe, you know, more realistic that you think you'd love to see Quakes sign?
I don't have a particular player in mind. No. If I had taken a moment to research a little bit prior to the question, I could probably come up with somebody.
Yeah. No, just one of those like gut feeling sort of things, like if you had one. But.
Yeah, no, I don't like just like any player that could step in. Like I think it would be cool to see the Quakes have a really solid forward so that it takes some of the pressure off the attacking midfield to create or actually finish those chances themselves. So I don't know. I mean, just pick a solid 9 to step into this team and perform. You know, and somebody besides Kai Kamara, like I like Kai and everything, but he's kind of like that would be like having 2 Chris Wondolowskis and and the striker core, right? Like we don't really need that right now. And like and Kai's at the end of his career, like Wando is what I'm getting at. But yeah, a solid 9 would be awesome. I don't know, man. If you want to pick a particular player, I can't really think of one.
No, it's okay. It was just kind of like, you know, if you wanted somebody in particular, because I know Fabi has some ideas.
Sure.
I think,
I mean, could we get a 35-year-old Falcao? That would be kind of cool. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that'd be kind of interesting.
It would be interesting. I don't know. I mean, he's done. He's he's done, but it would be fun, I guess. It'd sell some jerseys. But he probably cost too much, and it wouldn't benefit the team enough. So.
Right, exactly. It's a tough question for me to ask because there's so many different like leagues and players out there that you could ask for. Right. I mentioned a different podcast, I think a few months ago, that Andres Guardado would be a fun DP signing, but I think even now, like he's kind of getting up there in age too.
He's in the twilight of his career as well.
Yeah, Javier Aquino, whenever he's done bouncing around Liga MX teams, it would be fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
All right, so I think overall though, like the roster's at a place where like I want to see what they can do. We don't have to like tweak too many things or like be like, oh, there's like 7 players that we need to replace. I don't think that's
I don't think we're at that point.
Yeah. Do you have a tectonic take for the 2021 season? Some like a bold like statement you want to make. It could be Quakes related, it could be MLS related.
Quakes or MLS related. Okay. I think we are going to see Austin FC make the playoffs.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good goal.
They have a pretty impressive looking roster already. Here's a tectonic take. I don't think Miami is going to make the playoffs. Even with
thinking that too.
With Higuain, and what's his name, Pizarro, and Matuidi, and they just posted David Beckham sitting out watching the team train this morning. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't think they're good enough to make the playoffs. I think there are way better teams in the Eastern Conference.
I think they're a bit like an unbalanced squad. I think that could be a bit of a roadblock for them. Mm-hmm. I think my tectonic take is LAFC will get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs.
Okay.
I don't know why it's going to happen, but I feel like LAFC, they have this kind of feeling that they deserve to have more success than they already have. And like they're a great team, but even if you're one of the best teams in MLS, you still got to remember LAFC has only been in the league a couple years. So they still got plenty of time to get their first MLS Cup.
That's a pretty big take. That's a pretty tectonic take that you got there.
Because we were listing a bunch of Western Conference teams, and I think that there's some of those sneaky teams like Minnesota United and Sporting Kansas City. They're going to be one of those solid teams where like maybe you don't know too many of those players off the top of your head, but the collective parts are stronger as a unit than they are individually. And then
that's what I'm hoping for with the Earthquakes this season, because I think that's what we're going to need. I mean, and even if the Quakes bring in a designated player, I would rather have somebody who's not a huge name at this point, considering we're under Almeida's system, and have a bigger impact and actually contribute to the team, right? So maybe that's why I couldn't think of any players that I would necessarily want, because If you were to just take somebody that I hadn't heard of but found success in Argentina and was one of the top players in South America, and you brought him in and he fits into the system perfectly, well then that's what I want, rather than bringing in somebody who's a really big name who's just going to sell jerseys and might not contribute to the team.
I thought I did have, maybe not just for San Jose Earthquakes, but I think MLS in general, is that lately the trend has been to get a lot of South American and Latin American players. And I thought back to in the 2000s, particularly the early 2000s, MLS had strong ties with Australia and New Zealand. We were getting players like Ryan Nelson, Simon Elliott, Tim Cahill, and so forth. Right. Even recently, Seattle Sounders, they won an MLS Cup with Brad Smith. I think with young Australians in particular, I've seen a lot of them, they've made the jump right away from the A-League to like some prestigious European leagues. And a handful of them have been able to transition, but some of them get lost in the shuffle. So I'm thinking the A-League is a growing league too, along with MLS. But if they went from A-League to MLS and then they've seen the pipeline, the MLS to Europe pipeline has been a bit more successful lately. I think that would be interesting. I think there's some young players in Australia that I think could be interesting. Just thinking of if Daniel Arzani, he went to, say, New York City instead of Manchester City, he'd be an interesting player to see in MLS. So that'd be an interesting route to take.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of untapped talent there, but I do feel that, or I believe that the A-League is still years behind MLS.
Yeah.
And my preference would be for MLS teams to continue to develop their talents through their players, their talent through the academy system,
right?
Rather than have to rely on anybody, let alone Australia, New Zealand, or anywhere else in Oceania or whatever, Polynesia. But it's like, I think I want to see the talent come. And then in terms of like contract management, budgeting, and everything, I think it makes a lot more sense for the Quakes to be able to do that. Plus, you don't have to worry about the international issues, which aren't just sports related and contract related and team related, but there are also issues that come up in terms of the players. Can they even come here to the States and get a green card, or can they get a work visa or whatever? So there's so many questions surrounding that. So. Yeah, if there is a pipeline that's established, then I would say yes, I would agree with that. But I think right now it's looking like it's Argentina. Looks like it's that pipeline.
Oh, definitely. It was just a thought I had.
Sure.
Also, speaking of more local talent, I think Gilbert Fuentes is also another player for San Jose Earthquakes that we're gonna look forward to. He can be another one of those, like, maybe he won't play in as advanced of a position as Kay Cowell or Siad Haji, who we haven't mentioned yet. But I think he'll give us some good minutes throughout this season.
I think it's possible. Although I think Eric Calvillo has a lot to show still. Right. And I honestly, if I had to pick between the two at this point, I would say Calvillo would be the one that we're going to see more often.
Yeah, but he's more established.
Fuentes has potential. Got to give him that.
Right.
And he's shown some talent. So.
Right. See it. So I guess the last question I'll ask is that. Do you have any other expectations or thoughts about, the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference or MLS in general?
Just general MLS stuff in terms of expectation. I think we might see a blockbuster move at some point this season that we don't often. I'm hoping that maybe we'll get a name that takes us into the next phase of MLS. The league is expanding. I don't know that we've had that since David Beckham was the last one. I mean, there are a couple really big names in Europe right now. I mean, there's this guy who plays for this team called Barcelona. He wears the number 10.
Oh no! Oh my gosh, that'd be interesting.
I mean, look, if MLS wants to move into the next phase, right?
Go into a bidding war with Manchester City over Messi.
That's the kind of signing that's going to do it.
Oh, man.
Although that would really shake up the league, something to that extent. But I think that would be, just an idea, like you were saying, football in here a little bit, something like that. I think it's more likely that we would see number 7 from Juventus come over here to the United States to play before we see Lionel Messi. But man, a signing like Messi or Ronaldo would be a big deal. Still, even at their age, even though they're starting to get up there, they still perform. They're still some of the best players in the world, right? If not the 2 best players in the world.
Right. I think Mbappe is coming for that crown, but not just yet. Not quite yet.
I could see. I mean, if NYC actually had a stadium, I could see Messi going to play for NYC.
Right. It's still very far-fetched to see him want to play.
People are listening. They're like, "Well, no, that's crazy." But hey, when David Beckham signed at like 30-31 for LA Galaxy, back in 2007, I think it was, right? 2007.
Yeah.
When Pelé went and played for the New York Cosmos,
right?
Like, those were like huge. But also, there's a place for American soccer that we're starting to see exist that hasn't yet been fulfilled, right? We're starting to see American players make it in Europe and play in the top leagues and start on those teams. Like, people take that for granted. Newer soccer fans, people within the last 10 years, they watch the game and then they turn on their TV and they see Christian Pulisic, right? They see guys starting for but that's like insane to me, because even the best players when I first started watching soccer were like guys like Landon Donovan. And where did he end up going? He went to Everton, right? Where did Clint Dempsey end up going?
Fulham.
Going to Fulham. Exactly. And he had a brief stint at Tottenham, but Tottenham wasn't the Tottenham that we have today back then.
Yeah, it wasn't Harry Kane's Tottenham.
No, it certainly wasn't. And there were some guys that played minutes and big leagues. Brian McBride, right? We had Steve Cherundolo played all that time in the Bundesliga. Nobody ever talked about
Beasley
him.
had some Champions League runs.
Beasley had his time. So yes, but the point I'm trying to make is that they weren't playing for the best teams in the world.
Right.
In the best leagues in the world, like Weston McKennie is right now for Juventus, who is arguably the best team in the world. He's playing for them, and he's starting for them regularly alongside
Serginho Dest on Barcelona.
Serginho Dest on Barcelona, right? The fact that like I even left somebody as obvious as that out of the conversation tells you all you need to know. But we're taking this for granted. So if you think it's kind of a joke that I bring up the big names to come and play in MLS within the next year, consider that. The game is shifting in this country. And I think it's a big move. It's a big move to have the United States be an ideal place for guys to come and ply their trade, even if they're in their 30s or whatever.
I think where MLS is headed right now, I think that even if Don Garber will never admit it in a million years, I think there's a bit of a acceptance that we could be the North American Eredivisie or Argentine Premier League or the Brazilian Serie A, where we have some talented players and we're developing them for Europe too. I think that USA and Canada as well. Canada is, having one of their good spells of producing a lot of great players themselves.
There's a renaissance going on right now with that.
But we're going to see more and more players from, North America and Europe, and MLS will have a big say in that. And I think there's some big competitions this year, such as maybe the Olympics qualifiers, World Cup qualifiers that are going to be a showcase, not just for those young players, but also a lot of those young players come from MLS. It'll be a showcase for the MLS clubs themselves. And there will be more and more eyes from around the world watching as, people start to connect the dots and realize, Weston McKennie and Reggie Cannon, they came from MLS youth academies, stuff like that.
Yeah. So the talent's coming along. I think that's so interesting what you said about some of those other leagues like the Eredivisie and the Netherlands and the Brazilian leagues. And I think MLS is creeping up. And I in terms of like generational fan support and pure talent, I don't know that MLS is on par with a league like the top Brazilian league.
Right. But I don't think they are, but they can be similar. Yeah.
But it's getting there. It's certainly getting there. And some of the squads that play in MLS can beat the squads that play in Brazil. And some of them can do it handily. I know like last year's Columbus Crew, for example, can probably have beaten a lot of those teams. But you know what? There's still a way to go. And first of all, like MLS needs to be beating the Mexican teams before we start talking about, putting them on that level. So
right. And I think also people don't understand, people who aren't MLS fans, they try to belittle them saying, oh yeah, they're worse than like the EFL championship. And I go like, okay, sure. The EFL championship is littered with players who have played in the Premier League at some point in their lives. That's a good league just because it's not the Premier League. It's like,
No,
we don't care. The MLS is MLS.
It's still better than MLS. That's a good.
Yeah. But like, it's not the insult that they think it is. Like, being an MLS fan, like, you acknowledge that the MLS is a good league, but there are other good leagues out there.
Exactly.
It's not just the Premier League that's better than us. There's a couple more. We humble ourselves, but we're proud of the product that we follow and we invest our time in.
I totally agree with that. Yep.
Yeah. So, final closing thoughts, I think, for the season. I think this season might be even more unpredictable than last year because with the format that allowed 18 of the 26 MLS teams to make to the playoffs, it gives them all a sense of belief, because it wasn't until the very end where we're starting chopping off names like, okay, Atlanta United's eliminated, Chicago Fire's eliminated, stuff like that. So every team, I think, in MLS, barring maybe 3 or 4 teams, and even those teams might have some belief that they can make the playoffs this season, even if less teams are getting in than the year before. So I think there's not going to be an easy 3 points, particularly for San Jose Earthquakes. Like, we're going to have to fight, and we're going to have to try really hard to maybe get a 1-0 win over Houston Dynamo or something. Or maybe we come back from 2 down to beat LA Galaxy 3-2 or something. There's going to be some of those games like that. And there's going to be games we may lose like 2-0 to Austin in Austin or something. Like, that's just how it goes. I haven't seen the whole schedule, so if that game doesn't exist, I apologize. But I think it's going to be a bit of a bloodbath in the soccer sense. We're going to see some upsets, and we're going to see it's going to be a bit of a grind. I think even the big teams, if they start to accumulate enough suspensions, injuries, and international call-ups, that we're going to really stretch the limits, and we'll see some teams rise to the occasion. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of a club other than the Blue Bloods of the last 5 years or so wins the MLS Cup in the end. I'm not saying San Jose Earthquakes will be that team, but it could be. It's not just going to be within the same candidates of 4 or 5 teams.
I'm going to reference something that somebody from Quakes After 90 said at the end of last season. Sterling, who was one of our hosts, who shows up on the show occasionally, and he always has some really great thoughts to share.
Raheem Sterling?
If only. No, this Sterling is way cooler than Raheem.
Yeah, he's a good Sterling.
I love Sterling McGarvey. So, so Sterling mentioned that what he thought was really important was the Quakes to sign a number 10 player. Well, right now we have that player with Chofis, right? Mm-hmm. That's probably not who he had in mind when he said we needed a big number 10 player. But the reason why I think Chofis is so important is because in this league and in this system that we have right now under Matias Almeida, there's going to be so much on that position to perform in order to create chances, to finish chances, and to make the team as lethal as possible, especially when they're going to be chasing. I shouldn't say chasing, but running away from other teams, right? I can imagine the Quakes putting up 2-3 goals and then other teams scoring. This is a team that is going to allow goals. I think we have to accept that. But can the Quakes put more at a higher number, right? Because that's how you win games. You score more goals than the other team, right? I don't know.
Quick maths.
But I mean, the Quakes are going to have to really put some goals in the net. That's what I'm getting at. And in MLS history, in recent history, the whatever you want to call it, the 3.0 era, or transitioning from the 2 to 3.0 era, the teams that have those players and perform well tend to do well in the league. I'm thinking of like David Ferreira. Okay, for newer MLS fans, Jesus Ferreira's dad, when he came to FC Dallas back in like 2008, 2009. I'm talking about Javier Morales for RSL, Diego Valeri for the Portland Timbers, right? There are certain players at that position that completely change the dynamic of the team and make it a winning team. Zala Rayan for Columbus Crew last season, right? As good as they were, without him, they probably wouldn't have won the cup. As much as Dom Skipper from Quakes After 90 loves Yossi Zardes, and I on him too. I think he's a good player. They don't win without Zala Rayan.
Wow, so, it's tough being a Yossi Zardes stan on the internet.
So it's tough, man. So I hope the Quakes make a big signing and bring in a forward in the summer. Mm-hmm. I think that's really going to help. but they need Chofis to perform. The expectations have got to be high, and he has to meet them if the team is going to do anything this year. If they're going to make the playoffs, if they want to shoot for the MLS Cup, you know, or dare I say the Supporters Shield, like that's what they're going to need. They're going to need for that position to be the leading position on the team, the one that makes things happen.
All right. So I think that's a really good way to end this podcast. Thank you for your time today, Phil. Always appreciate the conversation. And this has got me even more pumped for the upcoming MLS season. And even if I'll be spending the next few days watching the soccer leagues that are available, there's no replacing MLS. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you.
Agreed, man. Thanks for having me on, Ivan. I really appreciate it.
All right, that'll do it for us tonight with this special episode of the TectonicTakes podcast. We'll be having a few more of these where we talk to other of our friends in the Quakes community and preview this upcoming season, because we all have some different perspectives of what we're looking for, and that's what makes this even more interesting. Like, people bring up different things that I wouldn't have even considered if I didn't have these conversations, or you may not have considered if you didn't listen to this. So I'm hoping you're enjoying it. Have a great rest of your day or night whenever you're listening to it, and take care. Go Quakes.
Go Quakes.